I'm Scott. I'm the director of the Center on Tech Policy at NYU and assist about AI policy. So increasingly, it feels like there's two opposed narratives when we talk about data centers. On one hand, the tech industry tells us that AI development is bottlenecked by energy input. Around greater data center capacity, AI growth will be severely limited. On the other hand, states, communities are questioning the costs that building and housing data centers incurs. In particular, passing on costs to other ratepayers, stressing the grid, endangering the environment, and directly harming communities. And as this debate grows, we're seeing the sort of usual group of politicians, national regulators, and commentators who are weighing in. But there's another actor that is playing a key role in this conversation, and it has largely flown under the radar for me, for us, right? The AI, the internet policy community. And that's state public utility commissions, or state or public service commissions. They're a bunch of different names. I have to call them PUCs, just to make it easy. Now, my argument today is really quite simple. I want us, the internet policy community, to pay more attention at the moment now to PUCs as AI regulators for two reasons. One, PUCs have significant, if indirect, power and influence over the construction and profitability of data centers. But two, that power is currently being negotiated and contested, meaning that there's a significant opportunity for us to not only contribute our expertise, right, to PUCs, but perhaps to influence one of the key regulatory structures that will shape AI infrastructure moving forward. So I'm going to start with the world's shortest introduction to PUCs, for those who don't know about it. Back in the progressive era, in the early 20th century, reformers argued that the public needed protections from the monopolies that utilities held over the entire system, and PUCs were created to protect consumers and the rich from these monopolies. Now, the exact powers that PUCs have really vary across states, but the thing to remember for here is that PUCs only regulate utilities, right? They do not technically regulate data centers. Okay, but let's look more specifically at what powers they do have as it concerns data centers. So in this report we put out somewhat recently, we identified 5 key ways that PUCs can regulate data centers indirectly. I'm just going to talk about two for sake of time, that arguably they're the two most important. First, rate setting. This is the core function of what PUCs do. They approve the prices that specific utility companies can charge for energy. Sometimes this is only for the distribution part of getting the energy to the final customer. Sometimes this is for the generation, transmission, and distribution. In either case, there's a great deal that goes into the determination of this price. Not only must it cover the cost to generate, right, or distribute energy, but also account for infrastructure development or infrastructure replacement, along with specific policy goals, right, like clean energy. And these determinations require detailed forecasting about supply and demand over the next 3, 5, 10 years. Now, PUCs not only approve rates and rate changes, but also create the broader rate classes under which the different customers are charged. Now, increasingly, there's this push to create these dedicated rate classes specifically for data centers, or at least for these super large customers. Now, why does this matter? These rate classes have special pricing, very important, but also they include all sorts of other provisions. Things that can help protect the grid or prevent costs being passed along to consumers. Things like upfront payments for infrastructure upgrades, mandatory monthly payments, contracts, time and use price settings. All of which can have a really significant impact over what and how data centers pay for energy. Second, key power is current. Now, most of the time, and there are a couple of exceptions, PUCs do not have the explicit ability to approve or deny data centers directly. However, in many states, they do need to approve the infrastructure upgrades necessary to serve data centers. Usually this is through something called the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. But the thing to remember is that in these big hyperscale data centers, they're so big that they will need new infrastructure. right? New power generation, new transmission, new substations. This is, right, PUC's significant leverage over the data center. However, there's significant challenge to that, to that happening now, to that power. And one quick example is really telling. A couple of years ago, a data center company requested an exemption to the CPCN process for its backup diesel generators that it need on its site in Maryland. Now, the law required all generating facilities greater than 2 megawatts to go through a permitting process. The facility planned to build 168 backup generators, each less than 2 megawatts. So they said, each one is less than 2, we don't need a permit. The PSC said, that's ridiculous, of course we need a permit. The company, and so they have to go through this long process. The company decided instead to go to the legislature and lobbied for a law that would exempt backup generation that was not connected to the grid. So we see how the specific powers of these PUCs is being contested right now. Okay, so I'll end here. I just want to leave you with this observation. I hope you agree that PUCs are worthy of our attention. Our ability as the AI policy folks to meaningfully engage here is hamstrung by a lack of transparency. Now, this is a different sort of transparency issue than we usually talk about, right? But it is one that is eminently solvable. PUCs are public bodies. All of their work is or should be public. But in many states, it's hid behind crappy, antiquated archives, janky websites. Each state has its own system, its own architecture. Many are terrible and fewer. And this makes it really difficult, practically, for those of us not deeply in the energy space and that aren't willing to pay huge sums for for really expensive tracking services to even follow along with what's happening. But this is probably where we need to start, practically, if we are going to bring our expertise as AI policy experts to the data center conversation. Thanks.